0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 20-second delay. July 2nd, 1959. We stopped the car half a block before the bridge and switched to a taxi. I gave the guy the address and he looked at me, looked at her, then nodded briefly. I'd been told it was better to take a taxi across the border, because if you drove your car, you became subject to major delays owing to inspections by customs agents on your return to the U.S. side for guns and drugs. The town had a strange electric brightness in the stormlight. Blue and green stucco shops with pottery on display. Pottery, copper, blankets, glass. I think I'm having second thoughts, I said. Please, okay? Maybe they're first thoughts. I never really thought hard enough until now. Amy could carry a fair amount of reproach in her clear brown eyes. I took it for granted that this was the only thing to do, I said. We should have talked about it some more. Her look was the kind of look you get when someone wants you to know she is taking great pains not to pity you. When we cleared the town and drove into the brown hills, the rain came hard. About 6 minutes later, the driver pulled up in front of a fairly sizable house behind some trees, and the sun was hot and bright, and the ground was smoking. The woman who let us in looked at Amy and said, "Please, your name," more or less managerially. Amy Brookhiser. "Yes, you'll come with me." And that's what happened. Amy went with the woman, who was either the nurse, the wife, the office manager, or some combination of these. I thought we might have some reassuring words for each other, Amy and I, or I might say something even if she didn't, although I didn't know what I might say, but they were down the hall and making a left turn, and I still had our overnight bags in my hands. All right. I set the bags down and went into the living room, or waiting room, and sat on the sofa. There were no magazines to read. All the reading was on the walls, painted sayings and occult symbols, and this was unexpected. Circles, chevrons, arrows, birds, mucho mystical drivel, and I was trying to absorb it all. A number of shaped sayings, words that formed triangles and tall palms, trees of life perhaps, sayings in English about the passage of the soul and the eye of God, and there were mystical eyes and admonitory hands on all four walls and the ceiling. I tried to absorb this surprise, wondering what it meant and why I hadn't been warned, and that's when the doctor walked in. A man I worked with in Palo Alto had given me his name and address, and I'd called and made arrangements, and there were assurances about safety from two other people I'd talked to. Safe, clean, professional, but no one had said anything about the walls. He didn't seem to be looking at me. He said, "Yes." I said, "Dr. Swearingen?" He wasn't looking at me. He said, "Everything seems to be in order." I said, "Do I pay now?" We seemed to be having a conversation that went backwards. He thought about the question of payment, his mouth scrunched up, my hand at my wallet waiting. He was a tall man in a white smock, tall and stooped, with an odd pallor, a deeply introspective, I thought, 6 feet 7 or 8, an American who did abortions according to the people I'd talked to, out of a sense of duty and compassion, and he hadn't shaved today. I paid him $200 cash, and he said, "Expect some bleeding," maybe as a way of veiling the transaction, and then he went down the hall. I sat there with the pictures and the words. I didn't know how to think about any of this. I didn't know what to call it. Maybe Amy knew, but she wasn't saying much. All she wanted to do was get it over with. I was willing to make sacrifices and be responsible. This is what I told myself. I wanted to fix myself to something strong, to a wife, I thought, and child. But I wasn't strong at all. It was hopeless, worthless, and weak. We wouldn't last a month together. We were restless and grasping. We were a fling that had run intermittently for 2 years only because we lived in different cities, and we were religious in our attachment to risk, and she was the last thing I needed in this world. And you felt a strange shaded grief, didn't you, sitting in the room, a sadness shaded by distance, and you tried to think yourself into the middle of the child's unlived life. Someone was cooking a meal a couple of rooms away, and this disturbed me. The savor of the food and the faint sounds of activity, someone opening cabinet doors. This disturbed and confused me and made me a little angry. Amy was 26 years old, a couple of weeks shy of 27, and she lived and worked in Wichita. I was 24, roughly half a continent away, and I knew she half hated both of us for what had happened. When Amy came out, I realized I hadn't told the cab driver to pick us up, and we waited a while until the woman made the call and someone showed. They'd given her a local only because that's what they were equipped to do, and she wasn't groggy on the ride to the border, but sat forward and gripped the edges of the front seat and didn't want to talk. The customs men checked the cab for contraband and breezed through our bags, and we were in our rented car in a matter of minutes. I drove out of Del Rio, headed east on 90. Amy slept a while and woke up and was thirsty. Up ahead of us, a pickup went into a spin, just like that, the only other vehicle on the road, skidding and whipping when it came off a sandy ramp, and I slowed down so we could watch objectively. "Swapped ends," Amy said quietly. "That's what my old granddad Parker would say. Truck swapped ends for sure." She spoke in a tired and quiet voice, and I drove slowly past the pickup, which was facing the way it wanted to face again, with 2 teenage boys in the cab, collecting themselves in a flurry of stupid grins, and I looked for a place where Amy could get a cool and healthy drink somewhere between here and the airport. October 27, 1962. The hotel was called The Waves, and why not? This was Ocean Drive, wasn't it, in the municipality of Miami Beach. Small, rich, angry men got out of rented convertibles with their dolled-up wives, women so cultishly tanned they resembled tobacco leaf. Spoiled, savvy, with-it kids from northern cities flashed fake IDs at the bar. They were enrolled at the resort colleges in the area and were eager to catch the act in the big room. A contingent of Cubans fell by, headed for the hotel lounge, shod, clad, tropically smart, the women in wraparound white and born to dance, and the men sunglassed and wary. They looked like bodyguards for some Jeff about to topple. There was a Latin band in the lounge doing mambos and cha-chas, and a number of Long Island sexpots were here, looking for second husbands. They traveled in pairs or with a sister even, like a hunter and her gun bearer, one divorced, one single, dating an orthodontist here and an iffy sort of businessman there. Says he's an executive in the hotel linen supply business, but when I call him on the phone, I have to ask for Marty, and his name is Fred. Eyelinered, tweezered, mascaraed, flashing acrylic nails, coral, with matching lipstick and blush. These were women who'd always been part of the in-group, and some of them preferred the nightclub to the lounge because they wanted to get a taste of Lenny Bruce. First you laugh, then you dance. The room was called El Patio, and the mambo music from the lounge kept sweeping in. Lenny was surprised to spot some old people in the crowd, a few canes propped against the chairs, but he decided not to do any cripple bits, not because he was getting cautious and soft. No, There was only one subject tonight, and it was central to his existence. We're less than 200 miles from Cuba. I know you know this, and I know this, but I still have to say it. Those missiles are just over my right shoulder, dig. A range of 1,000 kilometers, which is redundant from our viewpoint, but which disturbs me anyway because we haven't even lost the war yet and we're already on the metric system. And he stood nodding his head, looking semi-jet-lagged, a little paranoid, a little over-medicated, his voice subdued and his eyes murky with lunar gloom. And we won't get killed for being Jewish. That's the tricky part. They'll kill us for being American. How do we feel about that? What a way to begin a night of entertainment. There was a long, lugubrious silence. Then Lenny did a standing left turn, posed a moment like some discus Greek, and finally shot his upper body forward and pounded the floor with his fist. A college kid laughed. What I love are the names of our protectors. Check it out, Jim. And he took a clutch of news clips from the side pocket of the ratty car coat he was wearing, mumbled some lines of text, made a few mort-salish comments, dropped a clipping and kicked it, speaking briefly in his Transylvanian voice. All right, these men are deciding our fate. They're going in and out of solemn meetings all day and night. White shirts, cufflinks, striped ties. But their names are where it's at. Adlai Stevenson. Adlai. Gasses you right down your capezios, right? It's so exclusive it has no gender. This little boy is so special, we don't want anyone to know he's a boy. Because ultimately, dig, being a boy or a girl is so fucking common. And if anyone else uses this name within a 5,000-mile radius of our Adlai, he'll pay to have him killed. And all his progeny. Completely extinguish the line, because this is our family thing. That's it, you see. La Cosa Nostra. Only they don't have to do it with extortion and murder. They do it with names that no one else could ever think up. The divorced women laughed. There were lowlifes from the dog track in attendance, musicians on their night off, pool boys and out-of-work dancers. There were 2 tables of travel agents on a junket from Toronto. They thought Lenny was a Scottish comic who did impressions of the royal family. All right, dig. Dean Rusk. Dean. Born to lead, to advise and instruct. Born to be bald. No, yes, wise but also tough and shrewd. Look out for men with 1 syllable in each name. Unyielding motherfuckers. But here's my favorite, okay? You know what I'm gonna say, don't you? An old lady laughed. That's right. McGeorge Bundy. McGeorge. How do you survive childhood with a name like that? Was his name reversed at birth? A mistake at the hospital? Of course not. They did it. They marked him for greatness. Besides, he had a grandmother named McMary. The old lady loved it. Lenny took a while to rifle through the strips of newsprint, mumbling something. Yes, no, here's one. Roswell Gilpatrick. Roswell. It's not a put-on, it's real. Look, shown here in the cabinet room. Captured on film. The secretaries, the assistant secretaries, the undersecretaries, the deputy undersecretaries, the advisors on Russian affairs. Alexis Johnson. Alexis. Bromley Smith. Bromley. Llewellyn Thompson. Llewellyn. 4 L's in Llewellyn. Takes balls, baby. Secretly, see, I have to admire them, because they understand the logic of how to conduct yourself unsentimentally in the world. W. Averill Harriman. Averill. This is a man who has his own exit on the New York State Thruway. And here's us, a stone's throw from Cuba. They're not drawn here, but we are, because the atomic bomb is Old Testament. It's the Jewish Bible in spades. We feel at home with his judgment, this punishment hanging over us, illness and misfortune. Speak to us, sweetheart. But Lenny's paranoia and sense of tragedy may have had a more immediate source. He'd been tipped off at the airport that the Dade County Police had planted Jewish detectives in the audience. Yes, Yiddish-speaking fuzz who were prepared to glom onto every vile syllable he uttered in the mother-in-law tongue. You want names? I'll give you names. My name is Leonard Alfred Schneider. What was I doing when I took the name Lenny Bruce? I was moving toward the invisible middle. I'm just like you, mister. Don't bug me, man, or insult my ancestors. I'm just another Lenny, just another Bruce. But that's not what the ordained people do. McGeorge, Roswell, Adlai. They remove themselves from any taint of the big middle. And that's a genius thing. Doesn't matter where they go to church, their name is their church. They're not only not like Leonard Alfred Schneider. They're not like Lenny Bruce, and I don't blame them, frankly. He'd spoken quietly, conversationally, in his nasal slant, and didn't expect a large laugh. He put away the pieces of papers he'd been waving. The Latin music began to pound the walls, and a heckler started talking to Lenny, a drunk with a rolled-up racing form. But Lenny only lifted the mic off the stand and blessed the man. Then he did an impression of the Queen of England ordering Chinese takeout over the phone. The travel agents loved it. If your name is Roswell or Bromley, you have a real father. Only the most responsible parents give their kids that kind of name. If you're a Roswell, you don't have a father who comes around twice a year and gives you a novelty toy when he leaves. Here, kid, a little something to deepen our relationship. You study the item. It's a rubber vomit blob. Here, kid, put it on your mother's bed. Lenny snapped his fingers and did a shoulder curl. So happens the Office of Civil Defense is stockpiling rubber vomit in fallout shelters all over the country. They're in a frenzy right now, man. Get those shelters built and stocked. Sanitation kits, medical kits, phenobarbital to sedate you, penicillin, I don't know, for bomb rash. When the radiation makes you too sick to vomit, they hand out rubber vomit for morale. After the mass destruction of a nuclear exchange, he looked at his watch, they're going to want to rebuild. And all this Cold War junk is going to be worth plenty as quaint memorabilia. Those yellow and black signs you've been seeing everywhere but never really noticed until 6 days ago. Fallout shelter. Collector's items. All the stuff that's stashed in the storage rooms and laundry rooms that are designated shelters. Drums of drinking water, saltines, chapsticks for the flash. Cardboard toilets that double as salad bowls. Incidentally, he said. A waiter dropped a tray of drinks. The Navy boarded a ship yesterday at the quarantine line. First ship boarded. Army boarding party. Bet your ass it was tense, baby. Turns out the ship's not carrying missiles. Carrying truck parts and toilet paper. See, there it is. Ordinary life trying to reassert itself. That's the secret meaning of this week. The secret history that never appears in the written accounts of the time, or in the public statements of men in power. Those beautiful bombs and missiles. Those planes and submarines. Ever see anything so gorgeous? The weapons get the best engineering and the most poetic names. Meanwhile, some old grubby farmer in Cuba is waiting for a carburetor for his beat-up tractor. And he's been wiping his ass with the lettuce crop. They're reminding him he has to be patient, yeah, while they work out their big power relationships. Lenny did a dip and swivel. You remember the way your mother talked to you when you were on the potty? Make, sweetheart, make for mommy. He did a pivot and spin. And you cops on special duty, the linguists in the crowd, there's something you ought to know. The word smack or heroin comes from the Yiddish schmeck. You know this, experts? A sniff, a smell, like a pinch of snuff. Dig it, he's got a $200 schmeck habit. Next time you bust a junkie who's a correligionist, the word gets a little barking laugh from the college kids. And you stick your rubber glove up his ass to check what kind of stash he's got in there, that smell you smell is schmeck, my friend, which is just another name for ordinary life. The detectives did not laugh. A sea breeze blew through the room, and the band was playing cha-chas now. A woman sitting down missed her chair. Dancers appeared at the far end of the bar. They were spilling out of the lounge. 1, 2, cha-cha-cha. And Lenny rolled his shoulders and dipped his hips. The travel agents took a vote and decided to order another round. The music drilled the wall like tamale farts, and a couple of college girls got up and danced in place among the crowded tables. The original dancers moved in a boxer's crouch, advancing down the bar in pastel skirts and white guayaberas, while test missiles in California were reprogrammed with Soviet targets. Lenny seized the mic and cried, "We're all gonna die!" They laughed and half wept. He led them in a chorus of the chant. The cha-cha music poured into the room, and the dancers followed in beautifully balanced twos, and the men and women at the tables got up and danced in place, making pugilistic motions with their hands. 1, 2, cha-cha-cha. They kicked off their shoes and spilled their drinks. Lenny did a monologue in Spanglish, and they loved it and laughed and half wept, and a young man majoring in wardrobe management chug-a-lugged a glass of straight scotch, a stone's throw from Cuba. It's fabulous. It's marvelous. It's Miami.